Welcome to Bible Fiber, where we explore the textures and shades of the biblical tapestry. I'm Shelley Neese, president of the Jerusalem Connection, a Christian organization dedicated to sharing the stories of Israel's people, both ancient and modern. I'm also the author of the book, Bible Fiber, a 52-week study of the 12 minor prophets available on Amazon. This week's Torah portion covers Leviticus 6:8 to 8:36. The second reading in Leviticus is titled Tzav, which translates to the imperative command. Like last week, the text dryly expounds on how the priests are to present the sacrifices in the tabernacle. Details include how they are to dispose of the ashes, eat the grain offerings, and maintain the eternal fire. Each type of offering, be it burnt offering, grain offering, sin offering, or peace offering, has a distinct set of rules. The latter half of the portion describes the elaborate consecration ceremony for Aaron and his sons as they begin their service in the tabernacle. First, Moses had them bathe and issued their ritual vestments. As part of the ceremony, a bull was sacrificed as a sin offering, a ram was slaughtered as a burnt offering, and another ram was sacrificed as part of their ordination. Each time, Aaron and his sons laid their hands on the animal before it was slaughtered, and each time the blood was sprinkled on the base of the altar. Upon the last ram, Moses took some of the blood and placed it on the ear, thumb, and big toe of the priest, all on their right-hand side. After their initiation, Moses instructed the priest to remain outside the entrance of the tabernacle for the next 7 days. This is where the portion ends. Reading Leviticus in a vacuum, you may be scratching your head and wondering what all the talk about animal sacrifice and grain offerings has to do with righteous living. The Exodus story echoes throughout history because it is a call to freedom and a reminder of the dignity of all those made in God's image. The Ten Commandments are laced with lessons in morality that still apply today. The concept of Jubilee outlines an ideal society where everyone lives free from debt and with dignity. The heroes of the faith, from Abraham to Jacob to Moses, are virtuous examples of loyalty and sacrifice. Leviticus has none of that. It's like the operating manual for priests to fulfill their tabernacle duties. What are Jewish people supposed to do now with this manual, now that there is no temple? There are still those who know they are in the Levitical priesthood, but they have not had an altar to service or an animal to slay for 2,000 years. At this point, the Jewish people have lived far longer without a sanctuary than they lived with one. It isn't as if the Jews ever had the chance to voluntarily phase out their sacrificial system. The Romans decided that for them. The destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE abruptly ended the Jews' most central form of worship. As they mourned the loss of their sacred sanctuary, they had to ask themselves how they were supposed to atone for their sins without a temple or an altar. Of the 613 laws in the Torah, 150 of them pertain to temple worship. How were they to maintain God's laws when a sixth of them were no longer possible? If we look to historic examples set by other ancient civilizations, the Jewish nation and religion should not have been able to withstand such an enormous crush to their identity. If history tends to repeat itself, the expected next chapters in the Jews' long history should have been dispersion, assimilation, and absorption. They would have gone the way of the Mayans, Aztecs, Minoans, and Nabateans, people who have disappeared to history. But that didn't happen in the case of the Jewish people. One of the commands given to the priest was to keep the sanctuary fire burning perpetually. It shall not go out, according to Leviticus 6:13. The eternal flame was a practical necessity for the daily sacrifices, but even more so, it symbolized the uninterrupted connection between the divine and his covenant people. With the destruction of the Second Temple, the Jewish people have gone through one crisis after another. But the embers of the eternal fire, spiritually and nationally, never went out, even during the periods of violent winds. Without the ritual of sacrifice, they still maintained prayer, Sabbath, and a religious calendar that kept the fire going. These things have been the spark to keep a people together across centuries and continents. In addition to their rituals and practices, the Jewish people survived the loss of the temple because their prophets had already given them the tools they needed for a templeless and even stateless religion. The prophetic books enabled them to survive such an outcome. Though Leviticus had laid out how to draw close to God through sacrifice, the prophets showed them other pure ways to walk in communion with their Creator. Prayer, study, and acts of loving kindness were the new substitutes for animal sacrifice. They had been there all along, but now they were brought to the foreground. In the prophetic books, the prophets regularly critiqued the sacrificial system. They never voted to abolish it, but they wanted to protect it from abuse and corruption. The prophet Amos was commissioned to warn the people that burnt offerings by the wealthy did not cover over the continuous abuse of the poor. Never one to mince words, Amos shared a message from the Lord saying, "Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them, and I will not look upon the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals. Take away from me the noise of your songs, I will not listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." As the smoke was still rising and the walls crumbling from the destroyed temple, the first-century rabbis looked to the words of Hosea for hope. Hosea 6:6 says, "For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, a key revolutionary in the formation of post-temple Judaism, taught his followers that acts of loving kindness and mercy were the primary means to approach God. The rabbis used this psalm to encourage prayer as a substitute for sacrifice. Indeed, the Jewish daily prayer schedule mirrors the times of sacrifices offered at the temple. For Christians, it was the sacrificial death of our Messiah Jesus on the cross that was the final sacrifice. But Christians also risk leaning too heavily on the sacrifice of Jesus and ignoring God's desire for us to live lives that are holy and pleasing to Him. The Apostle Paul exhorted Christians to present ourselves as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. We are the living version of the burnt offering, the offering that was only dedicated to God. The Greek word that Paul uses for worship or service is the same word used in the Septuagint for the priestly ritual service in the tabernacle. He's essentially saying that the believer's daily conduct is like our temple service, and we must avoid all that defiles us and embrace only that which purifies and cleanses. Join me next week for our third Leviticus reading, and we will learn about what happened to Aaron's sons when they presented unholy fire. If you would like to get the study questions that go with this episode, visit our website and sign up for the newsletter at thejerusalemconnection.us. Shabbat Shalom and Am Israel Chai.